Mayapur Chandra. And then he said, you'll not find that name anywhere in the Shastra. He said, you'll find Navadvip Chandra, you'll find Nadir Nimai Pandit. He said, but this name you'll not find. He said, I've made it up. So it was at that time Prabhupada made up that name, Mayapur Chandra. And of course, the temple became Mayapur Chandra Mandir. And then he said, you go get brahmachari, one of the brahmacharis he called, local brahmachari, said, you bring him here. So I went and I got this devotee and I brought him into Prabhupada's room. Of course, we offered obeisances again, and Prabhupada looked at me, he said, get me my white bag. This white bag, that was Prabhupada's office. The white bag was his office. So the white bag was a very important little bag. It was a little, what do you call it? Plastic, what is it?
Vinyl.
Vinyl, yes, it was a vinyl white bag, little bag, half the size of a briefcase, and it was soft. But in it, Prabhupada had his passport, with his visas, he had his bank books, his BBT bank books were all in there. Whatever Lakshmi he got, that would be in there. So it was very important. And just to be able to hold that white bag, you had to have Prabhupada's seal of approval. It didn't come very easily. When his luggage would come in, you could grab his suitcases, but no one would take that white bag unless you were specially deputed by Srila Prabhupada. So after a few months, Prabhupada allowed me to carry this white bag when we traveled on the plane. And of course it was carry-on. So he said, get the white bag. So then you had to go to his Almira, metal Almira. Prabhupada had everywhere, every place he had. His sitting room always had his desk on the floor, like coffee table. Always had the lamp, like that. And always had an Almira in his bedroom, which locked. You had to keep everything under lock and key. So I went, I got the white bag, I came back in, put it on Prabhupada's table, and he sat there, opening the zipper. Everything he did with such finesse and such focus. So he opened it up, and we're on the other side of the desk. So he took, I don't know how many rupees it was at that time, but he grabbed a bunch of rupees and he handed it to him, and he said, you go to Navadvip and you buy silver bangles and silver ankle bells. He said, for your son. So he went there and he got them. So when we finally returned to the West Coast, Los Angeles, and then he was decorated with those. So Prabhupada gave him his very first gift for these bangles. And it wasn't until, it must have been about 8 months later or so, about a year later, that finally I was able to bring Mayapur Chandra to see Prabhupada. And that was on where I'm staying now in Hawaii. It's called New Navadvip. So we went from Navadvip and now we're in New Navadvip when finally I brought Mayapur Chandra, my son, to see Prabhupada. And Prabhupada at that time was sitting on the sun deck at the temple in Honolulu. He loved the temple there very much. So he would sit out there and take the morning sun. So I brought Mayapur to see him. Of course, he was just a toddler, crawling, beginning to walk. And I offered obeisances, and Prabhupada was sitting on his rocking chair. And Mayapur, he somehow or other, he made his way like 5 feet, like 2 meters, like a couple yards. He just kind of walked and he stumbled and he fell right on the Prabhupada's lap. He just fell and grabbed Prabhupada's feet. That also is very funny because this was my first experience in meeting Prabhupada. I basically did the exact same thing. Not so eloquently as my son. It was in the temple room in New York right when I was initiated. And I was very close to Prabhupada because I was with Kirtanananda Swami, who was big sannyasi, one of the first disciples. So I was able to be near Prabhupada's Vyasasana in the New York temple. Even though there were hundreds of devotees, and I was just a bhakta. But what happened is the temple room was about a little bigger than this tent. And it was jammed with hundreds of devotees. So that very first time we all offered obeisances together in the temple room, and it was in July, very, very hot, and we all offered obeisances. And I was so eager, it was my very first meeting in front of Srila Prabhupada. So I offered obeisances, and hundreds all around me, everyone were all down on our hands and knees. And I sat up very quickly again to see Srila Prabhupada's lotus eyes, his glance, just to see him. But no one else was getting up because they were a lot more pious than I. So they were offering their obeisances slowly. I was offering them all because I just wanted to see him. So when I sat up, I sat right on the head of a brahmachari behind me because he was still in his very pious mode. And he pushed me. And I fell right on the Prabhupada's lap. So it was 4 years later, now he's doing the exact same thing. When I fell on Prabhupada's lap and kind of grabbed his feet, he looked and he said, "What is the difficulty?" It wasn't a nice, that became the name of my book, because they were the very first words Prabhupada spoke to me. What is the difficulty? But he was yelling at me. But I later on understood that. Later on means 40 years later, I understood that was a perfect instruction that I could, if he never said anything to me the rest of my life, that instruction was enough to give me understanding of this path of Krishna consciousness. Because he would say sometimes, what is the difficulty? We chant, we dance, we take prasadam. Not a very difficult process, right? But that's what you have to do together. Your life will be perfect. Chant, dance, take prasadam. So, but when Mayapur, my son, did that some 4 years later, what did Prabhupada say?
I don't remember.
He said this is the beginning of his devotional service. He touched the lotus feet of his Param Guru, my spiritual master, grabbed Prabhupada's feet. So this is our business. This is what Prabhupada, you have to grab hold of the lotus feet of a pure devotee. And that means, of course, you engage in service. It doesn't mean we just make a show and whenever there's, there in the temple room you go and you, that's not it. It means serve the pure devotee. It's nice to make that show, but it has to have substance behind it. So that's what Prabhupada says. He said this is the beginning of his devotional service. Of course, it was the beginning in this life. We know he's very great devotee king, and it's continuing on. So then, some more months went by, and I'm in Los Angeles, and again I'm back with Srila Prabhupada, which that's another story. But again I'm serving Srila Prabhupada as his personal servant. And he said to me one day, rang the bell in the afternoon, this was in New Dwarka, and he said, call Nanda Kumar. Those of you that know the history of Prabhupada's personal servants, you'll know I became Prabhupada's servant just after Nanda Kumar. He was his servant previously for about a year. So now I was continuing in that way. So he said, go get Nanda Kumar, who was now living in Los Angeles with his wife. So I found my way across the street, go through all the various apartments. I got Nanda Kumar. He said, Prabhupada wants to see you. Why? When you knew Prabhupada, if he wanted to see you, there was a reason. And for us who were directly serving him, could be scary. Like, Prabhupada wants to see you. Well, what did I do? So that's what he was like. What did I do? Prabhupada wants to. I said, I don't know. Prabhupada wants to see you. So now we both went in together. We offered obeisances, and Prabhupada said, get my white bag. That same white bag. Yes, Prabhupada. So I went in, the Elmira metal cabinet, unlocked it. Prabhupada would give you the key. Kept in his drawer. So now we're both sitting there on the floor in front of Prabhupada. And he opened his bag. And he took out two $50 bills.
It's like $500 bucks.
That's like, this is 1975. If $50 was a good amount of money. That's like $500. And now I have been with Prabhupada 2 years now, and we had a we had an understanding. Well, I tried to understand. Prabhupada was very giving. You know, this is what Vaishnavas do. We give, we receive. So he said, here. He gave me the $50. He said, for your son. So I just said, thank you, Prabhupada. I had already been through the phase where you just say no, 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 and you keep saying yes, yes. So now I just took it. I appreciated it very much, and I took the $50 for my son. And then he turned to Nanda Kumar. He said, here. Nanda Kumar said, no, Prabhupada, I can't take that. And Prabhupada looked. He said, it's not for you. It's for your son. And then Nanda Kumar said, yes, Prabhupada. So then he took it, and he said, okay, now you can go. So this is how Prabhupada, this is how our spiritual master dealt with us who were doing some service for him. This is how much care Prabhupada showed us. What to speak of how you will be with each other, your children, eventually as you have children. It's that love and care. When that's there, if you love each other, you care about each other, you'll never have any difficulties. Because together you'll just do your devotional service. You see, just like, where is she now? Nitya Leela. My daughter's name is also Nitya Leela. But you see Nitya Leela, and also a Brahmin priest here. These wonderful children are raising in Krishna consciousness. Just like you, out of love. So this is what kept us serving Srila Prabhupada. Only out of love. Wasn't anything. And for me, it had nothing to do with philosophy. Philosophy is a very wonderful thing. But it was just seeing how a Vaishnava acts all the time with everyone.
Is Prasadam ready?
The other day I did a class in Prahlad Maharaj. Prabhupada was describing him in the purport, saying Prahlad Maharaj is a typical Vaishnava. Imagine, typical Vaishnava. He didn't say he's the most exalted personality in all the universe. He is, huh? But he said, this is typical Vaishnava. This is how a Vaishnava acts. Imagine how wonderfully he acted. His father just kept trying to kill him one time after another. But as a Vaishnava, what did he pray? You please liberate my father. Please liberate. So anyway, this was Prabhupada's mood. This is the mood of Vaishnava. When we're approaching that kind of mood, we can understand we've made some advancement in Krishna consciousness. Unless we carry that mood with everyone, we have to practice. So I'll stop here. I hear Prasadam is ready. I think after Prasadam, more people will be speaking. I'm very happy to be here. Also, Krishna's arrangement. He brought us here, my wife and I, all of us here to this place. Made it very convenient so we could take part in this ceremony. So you two, you have my best wishes and blessings. It's a very happy life. Hare Krishna.